Millions have seen Chumlee's life unfold every time. However, beneath the humorous TV character was a person engaged in a more subdued struggle. He battled his health away from the cameras, recurring patterns of dieting, regaining weight, and becoming frustrated. When the scale reached 350 pounds, he had to make a decision that would change his life. And the most recent news regarding Chumlee is making headlines once more. The biography of Chumlee begins in Henderson, Nevada, where he was born on September 8, 1982. Austin Lee Russell. Along with his brother Sage and sister Tara, he was raised in a household that included Native American, Mexican, and Scottish ancestry. His well-known moniker arrived early. The father of a family acquaintance believed that little Austin, who was just 12 years old, resembled Chumlee the Walrus from the classic Tennessee Tuxedo cartoon. The joke became popular, and Austin eventually came to accept it. Later, he laughed because the figure he was compared to was the silly, dim-witted sidekick, and began introducing himself as Chumlee. Chumlee had established himself at the renowned gold and silver pawn shop long before he became well-known on television. He was closely tied to the Harrison family, who established the store in 1989 through his lifelong acquaintance with Corey "Big Hoss" Harrison. Chumlee grew up surrounded by Corey and the porn industry, so it was only natural for him to work there in his 20s. Chumlee was known as the shop's unpredictable person even before the cameras began to roll. In particular, one story became legendary. An upright bass had been pawned for about $700 by a customer who intended to come back for it later. Unfortunately, Chumlee watched as the unique instrument fell to the floor, broken beyond repair, after leaning it against a shelf and leaving the eye-popping $20,000 replacement cost. Chumlee's only response when asked what had transpired was that he had no idea what he was thinking. Fans debated whether his on-screen actions were genuine or a ruse after he made that one mistake. Chumlee had been employed at the porn shop for 5 years by the time the History Channel arrived looking for a cast to make it come to life on film. Chumlee saw a chance when producers wanted a fourth personality to go along with Rick, Corey, and Richard Oldman Harrison. He was the only one among perhaps a dozen workers to come forward. He subsequently clarified that he was aware of what the show required. Despite their experience and astute business sense, the Harrisons' humor was what would keep the audience interested. As the one who could absorb the jokes and capitalize on the family's teasing, Chumlee chose to be the comic relief. He ignored the cameras, relying instead on the innate friendship he already shared with the Harrisons. It was a wise decision. He rose to prominence as one of porn stars' most recognizable faces. However, beyond the hilarity, Chumlee has intimate moments that are more significant than any transaction at the counter. 2 weeks prior to porn star's 2009 premiere, his father, a talented woodworker, died of pancreatic cancer. He claims that his dad's creations are the one thing he would never pawn and that they are still quite valuable to him. After its July 19, 2009 launch, porn stars quickly became a television phenomenon. The intriguing backstories of unusual treasures and unique relics weren't the only thing that captivated audiences. They also adored the prominent figures and the ongoing intrigue behind the scenes. Chumlee was at the center of it all, frequently the punchline, but always the comedic relief. Other cast members began to change in front of the cameras as the years went by. Corey Harrison is the ideal illustration. Viewers saw him transform from a green, unskilled employee into a shrewd, informed employee. He became more responsible, matured, and made less mistakes. On the other hand, Chumlee stayed relatively unchanged in the eyes of the audience. He kept up his portrayal as the awkward newcomer, making a humorous gaffe whenever the situation called for it. That image started to seem repetitive after a while. This is precisely what caused a contentious online debate. Commodore Blair, an 89-year-old Reddit user, expressed his annoyance at Chumlee's disruptive on-screen conduct. Fans swiftly reacted, telling others that his actions were part of the act and that a lot of porn stars is staged. Nevertheless, The conversation quickly grew to include more general grievances regarding the way the show chose to depict him. Edvar Candy, a user, noted that Chumlee frequently requested further authority, but those pleas were usually dismissed with laughter. Instead of dismissing his abilities, they wished the show had emphasized them. The show sometimes contradicted itself, making him look clueless in one moment and then showcasing his surprising knowledge of obscure items in the next, said another fan, the genuine Tina. She described the discrepancy as leaving him in a strange state of limbo. He was either a fool or he wasn't. Chumlee has been plagued by that contradiction for years. Even though he is known for being the endearing idiot, there have been several instances where his true expertise has been revealed. Regretfully, he is rarely able to transcend the silly character that brought him fame on the show. However, Chumlee has shown himself to be more skilled off-camera than most people realize. He even acknowledged in an interview that he had been cheated numerous times in his early career. He remembered working late shifts at the pawn shop when he was put to the test by dubious Rolex transactions. He was quick to trust at first, purchasing a number of fakes before understanding he had to either pass on the offer or wake Corey or Rick in the middle of the night to get their consent. He referred to the expensive lesson as his real education in porn broking. Since he was raised in the industry, Corey had an advantage and was able to avoid making the same mistakes. Moments like these remind supporters that Chumlee is more than just comic relief, and his candor in acknowledging these early mistakes makes him sympathetic. Even the shop's seasoned leader, Rick Harrison, makes blunders. In one episode, Rick spent $300 on a set of Norman Rockwell dolls after ignoring Chumlee's caution, only to discover later that they were only worth $250. The roles had been reversed for once. Rather than being the victim of an error, Chumlee was able to enjoy the infrequent opportunity to be correct while his boss suffered the setback. He later acknowledged that it was satisfying because it showed that even Rick was fallible, not because of the money. Errors are unavoidable in a firm that is based on transactions and risks. However, the focus was on someone else this time. Chumlee saw it as an opportunity to prove he could compete and remove the comic relief reputation, but his life was about to take a drastic and perilous turn away from the shop's cameras. Chumlee, who was well known for being the show's erratic character, was abruptly thrown into a high-profile incident that took place in the center of Hollywood. During one weekend, Chumlee was seen with friends standing next to his Rolls-Royce on Hollywood Boulevard when the chaos broke out. Suddenly, a man came up to the group and asked to be put in the automobile. Things swiftly got out of hand when they refused. Chumlee claims that the man became hostile, intimidating the group and even threatening to draw a gun. All it took to start a violent altercation was that threat. One of Chumlee's companions was the first to strike when the man grabbed for his pocket, delivering a forceful blow that sent him instantly to the sidewalk. Chumlee and his team rushed back into the Rolls-Royce and drove away, leaving the victim confused and seriously bleeding from the face. The incident's footage, which showed the bloody aftermath as the victim struggled to gather himself on the ground, quickly went viral. Chumlee insisted that the stranger had started the whole thing and insisted that it was just self-defense. However, it was never made clear what happened to the individual after that, casting a pall of doubt over the entire experience. If that wasn't already odd, Chumlee's name would be brought to the public's attention once more, but for a very opposite reason. Death scams. The first significant rumor about Chumlee's alleged death came in 2013 when a dubious website said he had died from a marijuana overdose. Although celebrity death rumors are constantly circulating online, for some reason, news concerning his purported death always seemed to take fire. In addition to being the cause itself was scientifically impossible, but the story was made up. Another fake report surfaced less than a year later, claiming that Chumlee had passed away due to a heart attack this time. Given that he was aggressively working out and dieting at the time in order to lose weight and improve his health, the irony was almost comical. Instead of lingering on the ridiculousness, Chumlee dismissed it all in his own way, demonstrating to everyone that he was still standing and going forward in spite of the rumors and the turmoil. Even though such tales seemed improbable, they were insignificant in comparison to what would occur next. Chumlee's situation drastically changed in March 2016 when Las Vegas police arrived at his house. A sexual assault accusation prompted the raid, but when cops entered, they discovered much more than they had anticipated. According to reports, the scenario resembled anything from a celebrity scandal playbook. There was a room in his house called the Chum Chum Room, and it included a stripper pole. It wasn't merely for show, though. Police discovered a rolled-up dollar note with powder residue and a baggie with white residue. Although there was no formal explanation provided, the findings gave rise to a great deal of conjecture. The more police investigated, the more concerning the situation grew. With several of them loaded and only a handful legally registered, what was initially intended to be a single firearm swiftly expanded to a dozen. Officers found guns and paraphernalia in quantities that appeared to be more appropriate for someone who packages and sells drugs than for casual use. Investigators discovered two areas of interest throughout the search. There is a considerably larger vault below and a smaller safe in the master bedroom. Without hesitation, Chumlee's aide opened the smaller safe. However, Chumlee resisted when it came to the vault. He refused to give up the combination and insisted it held personal items. He later acknowledged that it included firearms and marijuana after police reminded him that the search order granted them complete authority. He acknowledged that he smoked a lot and stated that the stockpile was only for his own use. He opened the vault himself in an attempt to be cooperative. Police inside verified his statements, weapons, and accessories. However, this admission brought up an additional issue. Anyone who has been classified as an illegal drug user is not allowed to own or possess a handgun in Nevada. Detectives obtained what is known as a piggyback warrant to confiscate Chumlee's firearms since he acknowledged being a habitual smoker. The report went one step farther. In his bedroom, methamphetamine, marijuana, and copious amounts of paraphernalia were discovered. It gave the police the impression that the suspect was involved in more than simply personal use. Various restricted chemicals, baggies, and digital scales indicated potential distribution. Because personal items in the vault and bedroom were readily identifiable as belonging to him, investigators were also able to immediately link everything to him. The resulting arrest was a significant one. After being admitted to the Clark County Prison Facility, Chumlee was charged with a long number of offenses: possession of methamphetamine, possession of more than 1 ounce of marijuana, 17 offenses related to other illegal narcotics, and a weapons charge for possessing a pistol when forbidden. The gravity of the situation was only increased by the strength of the evidence. To advance the case, detectives collaborated extensively with the district attorney, even obtaining a warrant for Chumlee's blood to determine whether he had been intoxicated at the time of his arrest. Police ultimately declared that he was facing 19 charges and 1 weapon charge. Chumlee, however, was not imprisoned for very long. After posting a hefty $62,000 bond, he left. His attorney, David Chiznoff, informed the media that they were prepared to contest the allegations, but that his freedom was far from assured. He emphasized that they anticipated an honest outcome once the case went to trial. The calendar's next important date was May 23, 2016. Russell was scheduled to return to court at that time, which many thought would provide a more accurate picture of the potential length of his prison sentence. With 20 counts against him, legal experts expressing their opinions through publications such as Hollywood Life conjectured that the maximum penalty might be as much as 80 years. Even while that figure seemed excessive, it demonstrated how terrible the situation was. The sexual assault report that initially led to the raid on Russell's house, however, was the larger cloud hanging over his head behind the charges. The identity of the woman who filed it was kept secret. Police made it apparent that the investigation was still ongoing, even though Russell had not been charged with anything related to that complaint. Investigators collected a number of items from his residence, including bedding, clothes, and even a DNA sample, according to the official police report that USA Today quoted. His client was ready to defend any future charges of sexual assault if they arose. Chiznoff continued, Russell may face numerous legal issues if the charges are ever made official. The History Channel meanwhile said nothing regarding whether Russell would continue to feature on porn stars. The network did not publicly remark. Those magazine was informed by those close to the network that they were just waiting for the legal system to finish. Additionally, the show already has a ton of material banked because production was not actively shooting new episodes. There was no pressing decision to be made. However, that did not preclude a decision. The logical course of action would be to sever relations if Russell were found guilty. Scandals of this size tend to compel networks to take action since they have been on this path before. The arrest alone, 20 charges on paper, gave history plenty justification to turn away from one of its greatest stars, even the absence of a conviction. And it was nearly a given that the network would issue a statement and end the connection completely if sexual assault accusations were ever brought. This placed history in a precarious situation. Since its 2009 premiere, Porn Stars has been a huge success, attracting consistently high ratings and becoming as one of the network's defining shows. Russell had played a significant role in that formula with his humorous demeanor. The entire show was now in danger due to the incident involving him. History might decide on a straightforward solution if the charges remained. Phase Russell out, give viewers a brief explanation for his absence, and continue with the rest of the ensemble or even introduce new actors. The charges might be resolved in that way, but the accusations of sexual assault were of a completely other nature. When other networks had to deal with that reality, the outcomes were disastrous. For example, following upsetting disclosures of Mama Jun's connection to a convicted criminal, TLC unexpectedly canceled Here Comes Honey, Boo Boo. Following the revelation of Josh Duggar's molestation incident, the same network also terminated 19 children in total. This had happened previously in history. Remaining silent, letting events unfold, and waiting for the courts to make a decision would have been the prudent course of action. However, Chumlee chose a different course of action, a plea agreement that fundamentally changed the course of his case instead of taking the chance of a full trial. He acknowledged a gross misdemeanor for attempted possession and a felony weapons charge for unlawful possession of a firearm under the terms of the agreement. He avoided going to jail, but the agreement included restrictions, 3 years of probation and required therapy. There was a strong caution attached to the deal. He might spend 2 to 5 years in prison if he broke the conditions of his probation. However, the felony would be erased and only the misdemeanor conviction would remain on his record if he was able to avoid trouble until 2019. Discipline was necessary, but it was a second opportunity. David Chesnoff, his lawyer, publicly expressed relief at the conclusion, stating that all parties had given it much thought. Crucially, no charges were brought in connection with the sexual assault complaint, which was the primary reason for the police raid. Chumlee was cleared on that front, according to authorities, although records connected the agreement to a local social worker whose specializations included treating sex offenders. The specifics of the therapy requirement were not completely described. In addition, the court ordered Chumlee to turn over all of his firearms and drugs. This was no little cash. Nearly 5 ounces of marijuana, mostly in jars and plastic bags, including one Ziploc that held more than 4 ounces, had been seized by officers. They also claimed to have discovered methamphetamine and Xanax. Standard pistols, a shotgun, and powerful rifles, such as an MP5 and a 223 caliber rifle, were among the many firearms in the collection, some of which were unregistered. Chesnoff insisted that none of the guns were stored for illicit use, and he admitted that Chumlee was aware that, with few exceptions, marijuana consumption was still prohibited by state law. Chumlee was able to maintain his position on Porn Stars in spite of the publicity. His colleagues supported him despite the uncertainty surrounding the network's decision. His co-star and employer, Rick Harrison, assured reporters that the store was behind him. Corey Harrison used a more subdued strategy, sharing cryptic yet direct posts on Instagram concerning truth, loyalty, and Nevada's LAX gun registration regulations. Chumlee received a clear message from the deal. Most harmful charges would be removed if you stayed out of trouble. He was already on probation, receiving counseling and facing what many considered a fortunate escape from jail time when the sexual assault charges that first sparked the probe were dismissed. Chumlee shocked everyone again, however, rather than withdrawing from the spotlight in embarrassment. It was for all the right reasons this time, though. Chumlee from Porn Stars astonished viewers by sharing his amazing weight loss in 2022. Austin Lee Russell, who goes by Chumlee, disclosed that he had lost an incredible 160 pounds. He had battled his weight for years. Thus, this metamorphosis was one of his greatest life achievements. Since the show's debut in 2009, Chumlee has been on Porn Stars with Richard Harrison, Corey Bejas Harrison, and Richard Old Man Harrison. Viewers seen his weight fluctuate over the years, but eventually he broke. He clarified in an interview with TMZ that he was just fed up with the never-ending struggle. He was so frustrated that he decided to finally make a change that would endure. He didn't make this decision suddenly. Corey Harrison, his lifelong friend and co-star, had already cleared the path by losing almost 200 pounds with a combination of exercise, diet, and lap band surgery. Chumlee acknowledged to People magazine that he was inspired to pursue his own path after witnessing Corey's metamorphosis. He claimed that since he had lost 320 pounds to 225, it was time to get healthy. He initially relied on natural means. He emphasized moderation and severely reduced processed meals. However, he peaked at 350 pounds in 2019 after years of yo-yo dieting, during which he occasionally fluctuated by as much as 100 pounds. He made the decision to make a more permanent move at that point. He disclosed that he had had gastric sleeve surgery at a Las Vegas bariatric clinic in January of that year. His appetite was significantly diminished by the tiny pouch that was left behind after the majority of his stomach was removed during the treatment. It gave me dramatic results almost instantly, Chumlee later revealed. He gradually lost weight from that peak of 350 to about 190. He did, however, clarify that surgery was merely a tool. He had a genuine passion for food, and controlling his desires would always be difficult mentally. He made a commitment to adopting a whole new lifestyle, regular exercise, and a healthy diet in order to maintain the weight loss. Additionally, he started to openly share his story by sending admirers letters about his metamorphosis and uploading before and after pictures. He celebrated shedding more than 150 pounds on Facebook and urged people who battled weight loss to take up the cause of their own well-being. He displayed his new perspective on Instagram by sharing inspirational messages and even interacting with followers who were on similar paths. The scale was not the only alteration. Activities that were before difficult become possible because of his additional weight. He even managed to ride a hovercraft, which he had previously been unable to do due to his weight exceeding the manufacturer's restriction. Even while his drastic weight loss was evident as early as 2021, the effects went much beyond looks. It changed his entire outlook on life, his mentality, and his state of health. It was a rebirth in many respects. And his presence changed along with his body. He became quieter on social media after years of controversies and commotion, concentrating more on motivation, health, and the straightforward freedom that came with losing weight. I appreciate you watching. To keep up with our most recent material, please like, subscribe, comment, and enable post notifications if you liked it.